Now, from CBS 4 News, this is Facing South Florida with Jim DeFede.
Good morning, I'm Jim DeFede and welcome to Facing South Florida. We have two stories we're going to tackle this morning. Later in the show, we will examine a stunning case of police brutality on Miami Beach that left 5 officers charged. But first, we begin with the COVID crisis. By now, most people are aware that Florida is leading the nation in cases, hospitalizations, and deaths. Everyone, that is, except for the governor. And that's what we will focus on. Not the number of patients filling the intensive care units, but why the governor apparently sees this as an opportunity to attack the president.
Joe Biden suggests that if you don't do lockdown policies, then you should, quote, get out of the way. But let me tell you this. If you're coming after the rights of parents in Florida, I'm standing in your way. I'm not going to let you get away with it. If you're trying to restrict people, impose mandates, if you're trying to ruin their jobs and their livelihoods and their small business, if you are trying to lock people down, I am standing in your way, and I'm standing for the people of Florida. So why don't you do your job? Why don't you get this border secure? And until you do that, I don't want to hear a blip about COVID from you. Thank you.
Don't you love the way he stormed off to thunderous applause? Now, Miami Beach Mayor Dan Gelber has pleaded with the governor to take politics out of the discussion, but to no avail. I spoke to him late last week.
Well, the governor, unfortunately, has made this a political opportunity more than a healthcare challenge. And I wouldn't have said that at the beginning of the pandemic because I thought he was very helpful to local mayors like me. But at some point, he made this about politics. And now if you go to his website, you see merchandise about, against Fauci and the CDC, against mask usage. It's really terrible because, for those of us who deal with residents all the time, we're trying to get our folks to wear masks. We want everybody vaccinated. We're trying to be on the same page. The way we would be, Jim, if this were a hurricane and he came down and told everybody to evacuate, certainly we would be echoing that or whatever other message we all were talking about. But right now, this has become a partisan issue and specifically for the governor, a campaign issue, which is really problematic because now half the community is not wanting to do what the other half wants to do, and that is never good when you're trying to get everybody to act a certain way.
Well, explain that to me. What is the political calculation that you think he sees that makes this good policy for him?
Listen, it's not what I think he sees. I'm not accusing him of anything. I think he's, just look at how he's acting. I think he believes a certain sort of lane of his party, and not all the party, but certainly a lane of the Republican Party, or at least his base, wants to fight the CDC, ridicule Fauci, wants to fight against mask usage because they don't want that imposition on their freedoms, don't want to have to worry about vaccines limiting them in any way. And so he is tailoring his message just to them and using it politically. Go to his website. I mean, he's got a beer koozie that says, I can't drink a beer with a mask on or something like that. And of course, that's going right to a certain group of people that think it's great. And unfortunately, what he should be telling them is, get vaccinated. And until then, wear a mask when you're inside, because that's what should be said to people right now. Because, in our state, in his state, over 100 people, I think, are dying a day right now. And we're in an incredible surge that is clearly only going to get worse until we do something that makes it reverse itself.
Well, let's talk about the moment that we're in right now. How serious, how bad a moment do you believe this is?
Well, I can only tell you the snapshot in time, but we clearly, in Dade County, for instance, I think we've got about 1,500 or more people who are hospitalized. About 300 of them are in ICUs. Our positive rates are a very high percentage. And it's pretty clear that we've got serious healthcare challenges. Now, it's mostly unvaccinated people in the hospital, but not entirely. Some folks can't really get vaccinated, and some have pre-existing conditions that make them more susceptible. But it's a problem. I mean, just look at the number of people that are dying. I think 140 people died today in Florida because of this.
That's down considerably from where we were, you know, over the winter. The governor tries to make it seem as if this is just media hysteria at this point.
140 people dying in a day is not hysteria. It's 140 people dying. I mean, you know, and I think what pains me the most is that these were entirely preventable. I am convinced that if our governor and every other political figure and every other leader said to the American people, you need to get vaccinated, don't quit playing it, don't play around with it. If everybody was on the same page, we'd be doing much better than we are right now. But because we politicize everything, Jim, we politicize mask usage as if wearing a mask somehow betrayed some kind of political ideology. When the truth of the matter is, it was pretty patriotic to wear a mask because you're helping loved ones, neighbors, or people you don't even know. It's what we all had to do. So I haven't gotten any. I mean, I don't understand the governor's calculation other than it being a brute and frankly callous political calculation that he's prepared to accept some pretty severe healthcare repercussions in order to obtain a very, I think, pretty crude political advantage. And I don't think that's a very good idea.
It's almost like an actuarial table. It's almost like he's one of those actuarials you hear about who is weighing, okay, how many people will get sick, how many people will die, versus what's the harm that's being done to either Florida's economy or to me politically.
You know, during this thing, we've been really preaching mask usage, which, by the way, during the course of the last year and a half, has clearly helped reduce infections and therefore hospitalizations and deaths. His stopping local mayors and governments like mine from imposing mask mandates doesn't harm the economy. You can open up the economy and still wear a mask. In fact, arguably, it makes the economy more prosperous because it creates a safer environment for people who might not otherwise avail themselves of a restaurant or a movie theater or just a mall unless they felt like it was safer. So he did that. He created those masks. He banned mask mandates for no understandable reason other than to make some political point. I mean, he literally is following an ideology during a healthcare crisis rather than science and medicine. And that, I think, is really killing people.
You put together a chart sort of showing how the governor's actions then have a corresponding effect on a rise in the number of hospitalizations from COVID. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not hard to figure out. We know that there was an initial rise in these infections, and then we shuttered everything, and then we started to open stuff up, and all of a sudden there was a huge increase in infections, and then we implemented mask mandates. And then within a week or two, which is about the time it takes for things like that to have an impact, it totally reversed itself. And then he opened up the economy again, but then said, we're not going to have any mask mandates. And all of a sudden, it surged back up again. And that chart is hospitalization, which means that you can very fairly attribute a certain percentage of those hospitalized to people who died. So we're talking about people's lives, thousands of people's lives. And I believe that it was a gratuitous move, and it still is on his part, to stop local governments from having mask mandates. They don't hurt the economy. To stop the cruise industry from requiring vaccinations. I mean, they know who should be on their boat better and their ships better than anyone else. I mean, these are private industries who want to simply create a safer environment. He's just gratuitously stopping them to make a point, I think, to his base. And ironically, it's his most ardent supporters which are most likely to avoid wearing a mask and getting a vaccination.
So he ends up instead issuing an executive order and threatening school districts that their funding may be cut, their state funding withheld, if they try to protect their children who go to school with, by requiring them to wear masks. Sort of curious, from a political calculation as well as from a public health standpoint, should Broward have just called his bluff? And more importantly, Miami-Dade school superintendent will have to make that decision very soon himself. Should he be swayed by the threats of the governor to withhold funding? Do you think the governor would actually withhold funding from schools if they required kids to wear masks?
Well, first of all, this governor has obviously demonstrated he'll do things that hurt people in order to obtain a political objective. I don't think there's any question about that. Banning mask mandates is exactly that. I think that there's a real question as to whether his order is enforceable. I think that the school districts, frankly, should do what they think is best for children. I don't see how, if you're running a school district, you don't do what you think is necessary to keep the health of young people, there. I think the problem is, though, what he's doing is he's creating sort of these wars in the school district. Parents feel very emboldened to storm a school district meeting and say, "How dare you tell me how to raise my child?" When, of course, if their child doesn't wear a mask and they infect somebody, it's not going to be their child they infect. So I mean, obviously, the interrelationship of what's going on in the community means something. And I think, the governor could really, he's missing an opportunity to lead, because real leadership is telling people sometimes what they don't want to hear, but what they need to hear. And he's just telling a group of people what they want to hear at the expense of really what I think is a healthy community.
When we come back, I ask Gelber about the police brutality case in his city, and then we will hear from two community activists who are calling for more to be done.